och välkomna till Folkets Radio. Welcome to the People's Radio. Today with Meia Chita-Tegmark, psychologist and researcher at Tufts University. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me.
It's great to have you on. So we're going to talk about how we are increasingly being hijacked and manipulated by AI, artificial intelligence, and how it's really controlling more and more of our lives and the lives of our children. And so there's so much to unpack here. Could you perhaps just begin by telling us a bit about yourself and your work, and also how this threat has accelerated during the last few years?
Yes, so I'm trained as a child psychologist, and I noticed early on in my career that there's this big thing that's being introduced in our environments and in our lives, that's technology. And people don't, we keep thinking about, okay, how the mind works, but there wasn't that much research looking at how is it influenced by this artificial thing that we're introducing. And especially these days, AI is a big part of that. So I switched my research a little bit into trying to understand a little bit how humans interact with AIs, with machines, robots, more generally. And that sort of research has also sparked a lot of concerns for me, looking at sort of what's happening. And I also have this sort of activism hat that I wear. I'm very involved in trying to mitigate some of the risks coming from this technology through nonprofit work. And more recently, I've decided to teach a class about this. I think there's very little education in college about the negative effects of AI. There's a lot of courses, a lot of insistence on how this can be so wonderful and how can it make life better, how can it help us solve the challenges of the century. But there's very little focus on what are the negatives. So anyway, I'm teaching a class now. It's titled Black Mirrors and Dark Psychology, the Adverse Effects of AI on the Human Mind. So it's a little bit of a provocative title, but it's very purposefully biased towards negative. That's not to say that technology cannot be good in our lives and cannot bring positive things as well. But this is very much I'm immersed, at least this semester, thinking together with my students about what are the negatives, what are the downsides, and of course manipulation is a big one, is a central one that we're going to talk more about.
So perhaps you could give us some concrete examples on how AI sort of uses, how it gathers information to creep into our minds and how to manipulate us.
So let's take an example of artificial intelligence that's embedded in a product that we all use, or a lot of us use, I should say. So in social media. So social media algorithms, for example, they are, they incorporate an artificial intelligence component. So everything you see in your social media feed is been curated to you. That means that everything you did on the app, how much you scrolled, where you clicked, how much you looked at the certain, picture, what information you put in there about yourself, your photo, for example, that can reveal your gender, these days you can, with AI, you can guess just from a person's photo what sexual orientation they have, what political inclinations they have, even their personality traits. You can infer from the kinds of things that they like on Facebook. So all of this data is available to this algorithm, and it uses it. And what it outputs is the next thing that is going to keep you scrolling and watching, because the way the AI has been sort of trained and programmed is to maximize engagement. That's its goal. That's its big purpose. And it takes all of this information in, and it calculates what's the thing that with the highest probability is going to keep you scrolling. So in this sense, it really taps into both your behavior, but also what you're thinking, what you're looking at, what you're taking in, who you are, your traits, even your states, your mental states, and it uses this information to influence you. It influence your attitudes, your behaviors, your mood, your beliefs about the world, and so on.
Yeah, and I noticed, for instance, people often say that, it's so spooky. I was talking to my mother about getting a new pair of shoes, and then all of a sudden it came up in my Facebook feed. And I noticed recently that some of my idols from sport, even like from my youth, would come up, like Mike Tyson. When I was a teenager, I was a great Mike Tyson fan. Started coming up different things, and Roger Federer and Rafa Nadal, and it's almost a bit too obvious that it's so to be maybe effective. But so I wonder, how does it only collect information from my Facebook, or does it sort of combine with the other kind of sort of mining of information?
We don't know. I mean, the algorithms are proprietary algorithms. Nobody knows exactly what goes into it. And I think a lot of people are demanding right now more transparency. I see a lot of people, both in the activism world, even my students that I talk to, who would really love to know, what data is being collected on them and how it's being used. We don't know that, but it's safe to assume, I think, that social media collects information also from your other browsing. So it has plugins into your browser. So if you've searched some of these terms, it will get that information, especially if you sort of follow a thread or a link from the Facebook. Now, from the Facebook or Instagram or whatever social media you're using somewhere else, it will know that where you jumped, where you're going. So it can collect more information about you. Now, there's some other ways in which it definitely can. I'm not sure if it does at this point, but I mean, our phones that we wear in our pockets, there's a microphone here. It can be turned on live at any time. It's not like this is the kinds of stuff that hackers can do. But I mean, you can imagine that it's not rocket science. So that's what I'm trying to say. It's not the technology of tomorrow. It's right here. It's totally available. It has a camera. Your webcam can be turned on remotely without you ever noticing, for example. There's a GPS location for your phone. Your phone knows, how fast you're going, where you're going, what shops you've been into. All your credit card transactions are a digital footprint. Now, these days, there's a lot of wearables. So people have like Fitbits or sort of things that are supposed to help with training and exercise and measure heart rate. Well, as a psychologist, I know very well that from a heart rate, you can know a lot of things about a person. You can infer, at least, not too precisely, but still, on average, very well. Are they stressed? Are they hungry? Are they sick? Are they coming down with a fever? These things can also measure your temperature, can measure your blood oxygenation. All of these are indication of what your state is like. Maybe you're hungry. Maybe, you're going through a particularly difficult time. I've been to a conference once where people were talking about, how Facebook algorithms, just from the kinds of words that you use, can predict when a teenager is going to kill themselves, for example. And there was a big, there's the question asked, what do you do about that, right? How do you intervene? Do you not? But I mean, having that kind of information is really, really both, invasive of privacy, I think, and also scary. There's a huge responsibility when you have that kind of power over somebody and that kind of knowledge about somebody.
Yeah. And also, I mean, one thing is sort of trying to target, okay, this person, he used to be a fan of Mike Tyson. He likes tennis. He's interested in this, and he goes to these kind of shops. Sort of, that's my traits, so to speak. But also, as you say, they are more and more learning how to also understand what kind of state we are in. If a girl is going to have menstruation, or if you're tired or hungry, so. Can you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. So this is something new. the sort of targeting based on traits has been done, and it used to be done sort of more in the paper and pencil questionnaire. Somebody would ask you some stuff, and then within for your personality, then you would try to create something that was sort of customized to your personality traits or your preferences, or but it was very expensive and it couldn't be done at scale. And, nobody could have thought of like tracking you every day, and seeing exactly when the moment of weakness, when you're like most tired and you're like most likely to buy this product, or, really so the sort of your life, the lived life, was still inaccessible. It was maybe your stable traits that you had over a long period of time that could be targeted. Now, with AI and the fact that we are so constantly immersed in this digital world and leaving our digital footprints everywhere, and with the capability of AI to take in massive amounts of data and distill patterns, a thing that's very hard for humans to do. Now you can basically, you can know, as you saw, what state the person is in. So it's not just that it's going to be able to target the most vulnerable of people, but it's going to be able to target the most vulnerable version of every person. So it can attack in the sense of like try to persuade or convince or change your behavior, bring out the worst in you when you are at your lowest, when you are at your worst. So there was an article that came out, I think it was an Australian investigative journalist, if I remember correctly. There was some leaked documents from Facebook a few years ago that were they were suggesting that they were selling information about teenagers to advertisers so that the advertiser could target them when the teenagers felt most worthless. So imagine you are trying to sell, a cosmetic surgery to this like 14-year-old who's going through puberty and doesn't know how to handle her hormones. And, you target her in those moments when she feels, her boyfriend has dumped her and she's like feeling sad and her friends are not responding to her text messages and so on. And you can know when that moment happens. And that's when you can show her, hey, your problems will be fixed. If only you had a better looking nose or your ears were more pointy or whatever stupid things. And this is very scary because we all have moments when we're not our best. No. And I think those moments should be nurtured and protected. And that's when we should be given time to restore, not to be targeted and preyed upon.
And also we're sort of participating in this hijacking of our senses, because I don't know if you can show a short clip. Maybe you showed me this movie where they advertised this ring, which was reminding all the time people that, soon you're going to have your period, soon this is going to happen, soon you're going to travel, you have to sleep now, and so on, which is also, in a way, it's kind of eroding our own faculties, because most people, a sane person knows when it's time to go to bed or when she's going to have her period, and so she doesn't have to be reminded. But so I don't know if you have this clip. We can just look at a few seconds.
Yes, let's look at a little clip. This is a product that's already on the market. It uses artificial intelligence to it's a wearable, and it uses artificial intelligence to extract information about you. Let me try to play it for you.
The future of health is not a thing that tracks your heart rate night and day, that gives you the most accurate sleep data, that tracks your heart rate during your workout, that predicts your period a month early and alerts you a week before it starts, that senses your blood oxygen levels, that knows when you might be feeling unwell, even before you do, that's water resistant up to 330 feet. The future of health is not a ring. The future of health is you.
You can you can search for this yourselves. You can, figure out a little bit more about what other features it has. But this is something I've heard from a lot of people that, and at the philosophical level, right? What are you doing here? We are introducing an AI and a piece of technology in between us and our own senses, right? And our own proprioception. As you said, like people generally know when they're about to come down with a cold, especially if you're in tune with your body. And I think, a lot of these things are marketed as, oh, this is a way to get even more attuned to your body. And I must confess, I had I had the Oura Ring actually for a while too, and then I just couldn't do that. I was I had recently given birth, and I thought, oh, this would be a good thing to just track my sleep and sort of remind me of, and then it went so against every sort of intuition and urge that I had, and every instinct that I had, and it kept like berating me for not sleeping enough, even though I had a baby that needed nurturing, and I just threw it away. It's like I'm tired. I'm really tired of an AI complaining to me all the time about things about my own body and my own sort of the interfering with this process and the urges that I had and all the natural instincts that I had as a new mom. But yes, it's marketed as, let's raise your awareness, let's get you in touch with your body. But I think it ends up doing exactly the opposite. It removes you. If you have to look at your phone to know if you're hungry or if you're, energetic or if you're ready for that run, I don't know. Is that a good thing? For me, it definitely didn't feel like it.
No. And also, one thing which I've thought about, if you just compare artificial intelligence with natural intelligence, so nature is extremely complex. I think there was some ecologists who said that nature is not only more complex than we think, it's more complex than we can think. So AI cannot understand the complexity of it. It can't even predict the weather more than like 10 days ahead. So what it has to do in order to control nature and understand it has to simplify it extremely and maybe stupefy it. So I remember I made an interview with a Swedish philosopher, Per Johansson, and he said that the only reason why AI can take over our jobs is that those jobs are already artificially intelligent, like you're taking a teacher's job or a nurse's job in the medical wherever and you simplify it so much that it can be automated. Is there some truth to that, you think?
So there's this theory. It's not my idea, but I'm sympathetic towards it. I think Stuart Russell proposed it. The idea that in order for AI to maximize its goal, and we talked a little bit about what that means, that it's very dependent on its definition of good, whatever you put into it, whatever your goal, the goal you've set it up for. But in order for it to more easily and more precisely and more effectively, reach its goal in relation to you, the better it is if it simplifies, it makes you more predictable. So there's this idea that the AI is not just that it's trying to find out what it is that you would crave for, but it's making you crave things that it can provide to you. It's a little bit of a twist there, right? Instead of trying to predict you, it makes you more predictable. It makes you more more in accordance to its algorithm.
More like a zombie.
More zombie-like, yeah, exactly. So this is a very fascinating thought, and he talked about it not just in terms of just the jobs and that we have and so on, but also in terms of radicalization and all these phenomena that we see with polarization and filter bubbles. He proposed that they are actually a consequence of this AI that's trying to make people more predictable, and more extreme people are more predictable, and therefore it makes people more extreme. And also, there are many other things that make people more predictable that are not necessarily sort of the more healthy and the more creative and the more sort of in tune with the best parts of and the more brilliant parts of humanity. So yeah, this is very much a very interesting idea of maybe we are becoming more zombie-like, more predictable, more like AI also, so that it can do whatever it is that it's programmed to do to us.
Often when people hear that AI is going to take over, they get kind of some images from science fiction movies with robots and flying saucers and so on. But I guess one can say that it's actually happening as we speak. I mean, if somebody living a century ago would travel with a time machine and just see today how everybody is, hypnotized, staring in their screens, he or she would probably think that we have already been hijacked by some alien force. So I wonder if you could talk about this screen addiction, how severe it has become, and also what it does to us. I know you have been researching this.
Yes, addiction is a big part of it, and it's a big part. So it's almost like it's very connected to manipulation that we've been talking about. It's a little bit of a continuum. It starts maybe with manipulation, where it's more like you're also participating, and then it becomes a compulsion and an addiction. I mean, there are some. If you look up all the Pew poll sort of statistics on how much people spend on their phones. I mean, even I actually dare our listeners or our viewers to just look at their phone, open their phone, and see how many times that there's an app that actually can track how much time you've spent on it, and how many times you've opened it. And I would dare them to first write it down on a piece of paper, try to make a prediction, and then see how surprised they are by what they actually see. There's statistics say that on average, people pick up their phone about 50 times every day. I think that's on the low side these days. This was like years and years ago. Social media, teenagers spend, anywhere up to 6 hours on social media every day. That's a huge chunk of time, more than they spend on, almost as much as they spend on sleep, and more than they spend on any other activity. A lot of the interactions that we have with people are now through chats and media, and there's a technological medium in between. There's very little, like the amount of face-to-face and heart-to-heart and soul-to-soul conversation seems to be dropping quite a lot. And the thing is that, again, going back to this idea of what's the AI's definition of good? If the AI's definition of good is to keep you engaged, well, addiction is the perfect solution to that. If you are addicted, you are going to be using this, the social media stuff. Yeah. And there's been a lot of debate recently, sort of with mental health professionals, how to redefine basically addiction to include some of these like more recent addictions, addiction to social media, addiction to internet is already recognized as a disorder, like a mental health disorder. And they are all in this category of behavioral addiction. So there's the substance addiction, people that are addicted to alcohol or drugs, and then there's the realm of behavioral addiction. And the interesting thing is that the brain activation on somebody who's really, really addicted to heroin looks very similar to the brain of somebody who is addicted to social media. So it's interesting how, these things have tapped into our neurobiology. And this is just getting perfected. The algorithms are finding more and more, like better and better and more precise ways to increase addiction. And this is the incentive structure that we work in. There's huge incentives to make just people in general more addicted.
And that's the scary thing, which is, with heroin, at least, society has some kind of readiness to deal with it. You can, if a person gets addicted to heroin, there's somewhere he can go, and everybody would recognize that there's a problem. But here, like, we're all addicted, so it's just like a collective psychosis where it is being normalized.
So I talked to my students. This is the question I asked my students in class. I said, do you think excessive social media use is a medical condition? And the interesting part about it, so the way you define in psychology mental health conditions, they're always in relation to whether you're able to function normally in society or whether you're not. So it's always a definition that's also based in culture, right? It's based in what is culturally appropriate at that time. And you've seen over the years that some things that were considered mental disorders in the past have been sort of normalized. They're considered now typical behavior, and the other way around. That there's certain things that have become, they're considered. So, this is a very anecdotal. This is not research, but it's a very anecdotal example. When I moved to the U.S., I'm originally from Romania, and I started studying autism in children. And especially this like Asperger's sort of like high functioning spectrum. I was always shocked that people considered that to be anything pathological, anything wrong. I was like, this is the ideal child. You mean the child that like studies hard and has generally just a couple of friends and is, didn't go to all the parties in high school and so on. No, that this is the child that everybody wants. So what I'm trying to say with this, that there's a huge cultural component also to what you define as problematic. And as you were saying, with social media, like if we normalize this, what does this mean? I mean, it's so like if you look neurobiologically, it's so damaging to us. Yet it's such a cultural norm, and it's so acceptable behavior to go into a restaurant and see a bunch of teenagers, literally like LOLing themselves, on their phones instead of talking to each other, in complete silence. So, what happens? The philosophical question here is, what happens when sickness becomes normal? When you have an entire society that's sick, and that there isn't anymore? Because a lot of health-related things are always compared to what's the homeostasis, what's the normal stuff, what's the typical stuff, what's the majority. But now, you have an entire society that functions very atypically, and then you can't even spot you can't even see the sickness anymore. It's like it's part of you. It's become society.
Yeah. And I mean, as a parent, I guess I'm having the same struggle as every parent these days. But so maybe you could talk a bit about what. I mean, they talk about engaging in social media, engaging in that, but from what are they disengaging? What are they? I mean, I have heard psychologists saying, for instance, that when kids come out in nature, it's boring because they're used to everything is going to move so fast, and this dopamine is going to be, triggered. So then you come into the real world where the grass is growing very slow, and so and you get sort of. And then with the playing, which is such an important function in the development of a child, what happens with that when every time it's mediated through a screen? So perhaps you could expand a little bit on this. What are especially the children and the youth? What are they losing when they spend so much time on the internet?
Yes, that's a very good question. So when I designed my course, and I called it, I put the word there, dark psychology. A lot of people when they think about dark psychology, they think about Machiavellianism and sort of predatory behavior. And we've talked about predatory behavior, like how can AI enhance predatory behavior? But I think there's another part. If you take dark psychology to simply mean the psychology of the darker parts of the human psyche, of the things that we're not proud of, the sort of the bad side of human nature. If you think of it that way, there's another component to it, which is this sort of abdication, this zombification in a way, this sort of the vegetative, the things that, the disengagement from the world, from morality, from each other, from our sort of higher calling. And this is something that I don't see talked about very much. I think AI is changing that a lot. I think the failure mode is, there's going to be a lot of predatory stuff that's going to be enhanced by AI. But for the regular person, I think the way that it's going to get you, it's going to be through disengagement rather than through making you evil in some way. So this abdication of what's what's more brilliant and good and I don't know, high in you. And with children, you see that a lot. I think we are part of nature, and we're meant to be in nature. And I think the first thing that we disengage from is nature, is the non-natural world. Actually, one of my colleague activists, Azar Raskin, the person who invented the infinite scroll, he's very regretful now of that invention, because he sees how much addiction it has created, and he has now a project on trying to use technology maybe to, get people more in tune with the natural world and with non-human animals and so on. So this idea that returning a little bit to our environment is I think a very powerful one. I've asked my students actually to brainstorm about what they can do to mitigate the mindless scrolling or almost addiction, or or addiction. Some of them even came and told me yes, I'm totally addicted to this thing. And the interesting takeaway from all of that conversation was that it seems very futile to try to resist the forces by little tweaks, like trying to limit your time, or they're good, but they're just a Band-Aid. And all of them agreed that the only way out is perhaps to give you a chance to love something more than you love your technology and your AI. And for children, I think, I'm a mother now, and I have a lovely little boy, and I look at him, and I have to think of all of strategies and how to use all this knowledge that I've gathered that's a little bit more abstract, and how to make it concrete to sort of, I really want to save him from, I don't want him to become a zombie. I don't want him to become addicted to these things. Yeah. And I think my rule of thumb so far has been create that space and that time and that place for him to actually love something else. Give him a chance to love nature, give him a chance to love animals, give him a chance to love people around him and play, and all the things that I think could make him could take the bright side of his psychology and enhance it rather than the dark one.
And also, as you mentioned, that if you don't use a certain faculty you erode it. So like with the GPS, for instance, like obvious, like taxi drivers were much better to navigate in cities before than they are today. But on a more sort of sinister level, there's also this saying that when you talk about the human imagination, which is an enormously powerful tool, use it or somebody else will, or something else will. So that is, sometimes when you talk about the matrix, I think about in indigenous cultures, they are very much aware that we are not only spectators of reality, we're co-creators of reality. So, and this is where, for instance, where fairy tales, in almost every culture, you tell fairy tales to children. So they listened to this, Hans and Gretchen, they walked in the forest, and then they came to this big house made of candy, and they get this inner images. So this is one very important thing of being human, that we can create these images. So when all the images and all this comes from the outside, does that make it easier to hack and sort of draw us into this matrix?
We talked some, I think some years ago, a little bit about VR, the virtual reality, the two of us. That's probably the extreme version of this, where all your reality gets mediated by technology and especially technology controlled by somebody else. But already a lot of our technology is mediating. It's mediating our interactions. It's mediating everything. And then you have to ask yourself, do you want it that way? And who is controlling that technology? And I think that a lot of technology and a lot of AI is being put to the the task it is given is to make things what they call easy for us, accessible for us. So you don't have to put in the mental effort to imagine that house that Hansel and Gretel went to. You have it here. Here it is. Like, look at it. You don't have to. There are these books now, that actually use an eye tracker camera. So when there's an image, and then when you look at it, it starts to Hansel and Gretel start to jump and stuff. So you don't even have to click on it or touch it or anything. It's sort of it measures where you're looking, and it sort of creates these things. And it can be nice, it can be fun, and it can be gimmicky. But the question I have is, if this becomes pervasive, is if everything that you do is mediated by this. Then, well, first of all, yes, you're much more vulnerable to control. I think that's a no-brainer to being controlled by somebody else. But it's also, you're losing part of that very deeply biological and human ability to adapt to your environment. If your environment is always adapting to you, then are you really growing? Are you really what's happening to you? Not to mention that, of course, removing anything that has friction in it, that has a little bit of, requires effort. That also means removing people. Interacting with people is effortful. Why don't you just interact with your AI friend then, who understands you perfectly, who remembers everything you've ever told it, who doesn't need to ever be sleepy or cranky or moody or eat or, do anything that you don't like. It can be your ideal, but then what's left of you?
Yeah.
You have something customized to you, but who are you anymore if you're not defined in relation to your environment, your nature, your people, your community?
Yeah, it's a road leading away from life, really.
Yeah, that's a very profound thing. So you wrote about the war on life. And I think this, if there's anything, if there's a way to summarize, AI and manipulation, what is it that's very unique about it? And this idea that it can understand the states that you're in, not just your traits, is that life itself, living itself, becomes a vulnerability. So all the processes of life, of, having high energy, low energy, needing to eat, needing to replenish, needing to go outside, needing to sleep, to slow down, to, all of these, rhythms that, in the past used to be celebrated and ritualized sometimes, all of this becomes now a vulnerability. It becomes an opportunity, a door for something or somebody or something these days to influence you, to control you, to make you do, make you do whatever it wants you to do. And that, I think, is a scary thought. That just by living, you become prey, you become a target, you become accessible.
And also in this course material we teach, I looked at it. You compare, like, if you say that if you're scrolling with a purpose, then it feels like something you're doing, but many times it feels like it's something that's happening to you, like the weather or something like that. Can you explain the difference here?
This is tied into another project of mine, which I'm sort of just trying to put together. How can we instill more mindfulness in the way we interact with technology? And I asked my students to, write their reflections on when they scroll. What are their sensations? What are they experiencing? And there were several things that shocked me that came out in their reflections. One of them was this idea that, they lose track of time. So they lose track. I think all of us relate to that, right? The loss of time. Yeah. The other one was somebody mentioned that several of them mentioned that they don't remember what they just consumed, that the rate of making memories was very low. So they've been scrolling for an hour and then remember almost nothing about it. The other theme that came up was this idea that there's nothing better to do. So scrolling was filling the voids, which I thought was like, you are young. You're young. You're at one of the most amazing universities in the world, in one of the most amazing and like intellectually powerful, the cities in the world. And it's, it also has Boston area has this beautiful nature and everything. And how come you guys need to fill voids? Like, why is your life so full of voids? So I was sort of reacting a little bit. It probably dates me. I felt a little bit like an old curmudgeon, being like, but you're so young and you're so active. But where I was going with this is that, I tried to think, okay, how can you systematically think about this? And there's four concepts actually that come from psychology. One of them is this idea of that you maybe are two. You can imagine it yourself as two selves. One of them is the experiencing self, and one of them is the remembering self. The self that like lives in the moment, and then the self that makes the story about your life and evaluates your life. The other one is that you can. The other two concepts is that you sometimes operate very automatically, sort of a little bit zombie-like, very based on habits. And that's like your system one. And then you have the system two, which is sort of more deliberate and intentional and so on. So I asked my students, actually, if you think of your scrolling activity, and you were to like imagine it, on a spectrum, from mindless to mindful, from sort of effortless to effortful, intentional to unintentional, feels good in the moment, creates good memories, and so on. And there's a line. Where would you put it how it is now, and where would you like it to be? And almost everybody wanted for their interaction with technology, and especially with scrolling and consuming content online, to be more intentional, more conscious, to have better memories, to feel like it's something that they do, have more agency over it, rather than feeling like something that just happens to you, which is the case. They felt that was the case. So it's very interesting that that's the direction in which a lot of people want to go in. I think their reactions were very relatable to everybody. But the pull and the incentives in the industry is to put people on automatic mode, make everything to be effortless. Like even, the fact that when you watch a YouTube video, it cues in the next one, it starts playing the next one. Like a lot of people have that feature. The fact that there's an infinite scroll, so you can keep losing track of time. And it actually implements a lot of social media, and a lot of these platforms implement a lot of the sort of tricks that gambling industry is implementing with the slot machines and the gambling, gambling games. So we're at this weird spot, when we would like more intention, we would like more agency, but there are thousands and thousands of people whose job is to erode that, to make you less intentional, less purposeful in your search, less. And so now there are thousands and thousands of people who are doing that, but now there's starting to be incredibly powerful AIs that are trying to do that. And I'm actually more scared about the AIs that are trying to do that than the thousands of people who are trying to create solutions for you to be more unconscious and more automatic.
And one thing, which is also so paradoxical, that, there's so much research that shows that AI, interaction with AI and social media, especially at this level, when it's several hours a day, it does not make people happy. And I think one of the saddest thing I saw in a documentary about young girls, they said that like one generation ago, many young women and girls, they wanted to look like the typical movie star at that time, like Marilyn Monroe or Brigitte Bardot. Today, they wish to look like their own Instagram image that has been manipulated by AI to look like a model. So, I mean, you can imagine what it does to their own self-image, that they have this artificial image of themselves, which is sort of more perfect, and they're not good enough.
Absolutely. And there's so much suffering, honestly, that's being inflicted in these ways. There's somebody was saying that social media is such a perfect medium for constantly getting the message that your life, your real life, is not quite up to par, that the way you really look is not quite right, that what you really feel is not quite, that basically even the fact, and you might think of this as benign, but the fact that you get so many likes for things that are not really you, like it's your photo, but it has filters on, and it's it was your vacation, but it's like this very edited piece of it. It doesn't show that time when you missed the bus and you had the meltdown, and it just shows the beautiful beach and the umbrella and the beverage in your hand. So it's like you're constant. Even the fact that people like the likes that you get, the approval, the social approval for all of these things send you the message that the rest is like not approved. But motherhood is a big part of my life now, and as I was getting ready to give birth, I was watching a bunch of videos on young mothers' experiences and stuff, and even that, like, there's this entire culture there of like, what does it mean to be a good mother, and all of it, a lot of it had to do with like, how do you have the perfect nursery with like the perfect plushy toys and the perfectly color matched crib with the lighting and I was like, and after having a baby, I was like, no, that's not at all. Not only is it not important, but it's like, it's such a perverted, signal and message that's being sent to mothers about what matters. When there's so many other stuff that is being sort of pushed into oblivion.
So it's a huge task ahead of us. So how do we fight back against this? It's going to, of course, be the topic of a separate conversations. But if you just say a few things, maybe the most important things, especially for parents, and also this addiction and so on.
Yes, I mean it's a very big challenge. We can think about ourselves just sort of individually, like what can we do? I think it all starts with being much more mindful about what we're engaging with. Apropos engagement, right? What were we engaging with, but also thinking about what are we disengaging from, and trying to correct that in our lives. That being said, I dislike it a lot when companies and the culture puts all the blame on the individual. Well, you are the one who is like sitting on social media, and you're the one that got addicted because you couldn't control yourself and so on. The truth is, that these things are dangerous, right? It's like they are meant to erode your self-control. They are meant to make you fall prey to these things. And it's very unreasonable to ask individuals to resist on their own. It's a huge task, especially children. It's so unfair to children to put this on their shoulders. So I think that we also have to demand better technologies. Like, we need to demand more humane technologies. There's this concept that's called cognetics. So just like your sofa has to respect some principle of ergonomics, like to support your spine and not make you put you in a weird position that's going to give you a backache. The idea is we should have technologies that respect cognetics, that respect the sort of the shape, the peculiarities of the human thought, that it really respects critical human thinking and feeling. And I think a lot of the technologies that are now that we have now, and especially some that are powered by artificial intelligence, they don't respect that. They don't respect people's vulnerabilities. They don't respect what's unique about humans. They're not meant to, bolster you and support you, but rather, collapse you and push you down. So I think demanding that, there are many ways in which we can do that. We can do it maybe through regulation. I think I work with a nonprofit that is involved in trying to get better regulation for companies, for products, and even just as a consumer, just refuse to use the things that are detrimental to you. But again, it shouldn't just be on you. It should be on our societies, our governments, our regulators. And also, if you are one of the people that are creating this technology, that's working in this, ask yourself, what is this? What you want? Is this the legacy that you want to put out into the world? Ask yourself, what is it that you're working on, and is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? And if it's a bad thing, change course and find creative solutions for this, and design things that are meant to help.
But I think that, many people are maybe a bit, they don't have so much trust that the government is going to solve this for us. So, I mean, your son is very small now, but when he grows up, what are you going to do to try that he's not going to be addicted and ruined by this artificial intelligence?
I mean, I have a few sort of rules of thumb. He's now 14 months. So, it's that level, like we're talking about that age. But for example, just a few things that I do. I try not to, I have a very, very strict limitation on screens. So I try not to let him interact much with screens. It's very hard to do. He's already sort of figured out that, he likes to look at photos of himself, and I feel like, but it's a photo of himself. It's nice for him to see it. So he's already hacking, he's already, we're already extending those rules. But another thing that I try very hard to do is when he engages with me, it's very important for me that immediately I put the phone down, I put the screen down. It's a little bit hard. It makes it a little bit hard with work because a lot of my work is on a computer. But I try. There's a lot of research that shows that, especially in early childhood, if you lose eye contact with your child to your phone constantly, that they will develop they will not develop the same social abilities as they would have otherwise. And as I said, I think for me, the big important thing is to give him a chance to love something else more. And what I would love for him to love, partly because maybe I'm built that way and I love it too, is just being in nature, being with animals, slowing down. But another thing that I try very much to do, and this was very difficult, is to not accept the speeds with which society functions today. Try very hard for my own self to, have those moments of boredom that used to be part of typical human life. And those, because, it sounds terrible at first, the boredom, but then in that space where you do nothing, you start to notice the other things. You start to notice the nature, as you were talking earlier, the blade of grass that grows very, very slowly, the animals that are there, but they're not very visible, unless you actually learn to listen to that bird chirping and that little squirrel that's, gathering acorns and so on. So I know that, these may seem very little things compared to the forces that are out there that are trying to get the better of us. But I think it's a start, and I think that changing our paradigms and what we value, they can be almost like a cultural, like a societal. I'm imagining more of a cultural, a societal movement where more and more of us decide that this is not how we want to live, that this is not respectful of who we are as humans and as parts of nature, and that, we choose to live differently. And hopefully there can be a movement that starts with us, and that we can, that it can propagate to the point where we get more support, even from the tech creators and the developers that are out there.
Just before we wrap up, on a philosophical note, when I wrote my book, I was thinking a lot about sort of the difference between wisdom and intelligence. Sometimes these two concepts get sort of mixed up with each other. And I know that in artificial intelligence researchers, they have criteria of intelligence, like being able to solve a complex goal or something like that. Then I thought about it, that it's not really, I was thinking about if you compare healthy cells in the body and cancer cells, you could probably say that by this definition, the cancer cells are more intelligent because they achieve their goal faster, they grow faster, and so on. So the difference is not really in about solving goals. The difference is in a different experience. That it's about experience yourself as part of the web of life. So when intelligence gets detached from this experience, it can become extremely destructive.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that intelligence, at least the way it's used when you talk about artificial intelligence, it has gone through historically the definition of intelligence and the definition of artificial intelligence has gone through different phases. And it started out as, being able to think like humans, or being able to, follow the rules of rational thought, that was considered artificial intelligence. And the interesting thing is that what revolutionized completely the field was actually reducing the definition, like reducing what intelligence means to be something incredibly simplistic, I shouldn't say simplistic, but simple. Ability to accomplish complex goals, being a rational agent, being an agent. That's it. That's all you need to be in order to an agent that accomplishes something complex. And that has revolutionized things because it has taken away the conversation. It was taking the conversation away from ideas of consciousness, of experience, and of all of these things. And it's like, no, intelligent. You don't need to experience anything to be intelligent. A zombie can be intelligent. But I think you're right. We can call it wisdom. This sort of ability to be in the world from experience and through experience. I think that's quite different. That's a very different thing than pure intelligence. And I think it's so far. I think wisdom is something that requires consciousness. That it requires the experiencing of the world around us. And I think that humans I don't think AIs have it. I think humans have it. I think non-human animals also have it. I think. Who knows? Maybe even plants and the rest of nature have have this wisdom, this experience, this ability to act from experience and through experience. Is how I would put it.
So finally, we have really lost our way as humanity, and now we're falling prey to this AI. Some people maybe philosophically would say that AI has come to remind us who we actually are. Either we sort of get our act together and remember who we are, or we're going to be trapped into this matrix and gone. I think,
as I said, there isn't just one AI at this point. Like there's many, many different flavors of it and many different, applications of it. And it's an entire, there's a huge taxonomy. But at the deeper philosophical level, I think the idea of us ushering into the world something that looks increasingly less like a tool and that humans use and more like another entity, more like an alien mind, maybe another kinds of species. Absolutely. I think if you think of it that way and from that point of view, it's like it's a wake-up call. Like, what are we creating? What are we going to replace ourselves with? I hope that we still have the time, and that we have the willingness to, and the wisdom, as we've just talked, to not replace ourselves, and to create things, to put things out into the world that are actually beneficial and protective of humans and nature as well. But I worry. I worry very much, because that does not seem at this point to be the trend, the direction that we're going in.
Meia Chita-Tegmark, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, as always.